Welcome to the Tech Talk podcast with Vodacom, where we look at trending tech made simple. Today we're going to be looking at gaming, but specifically gaming as a parent. What do you need to look out for and what do you need to know? My name is Drew and I'm joined by my co-host Taryn.
So we can't talk about tech without getting into gaming. I am not a gamer, so if I'm a little bit quiet on this one, guys, it's because I'm taking in as much as I can so I can learn. And we've got a really cool person in conversation with us today, Pippa Tshabalala. She's a South African personality in gaming and pop culture. And we definitely couldn't think of anyone better to kind of join us in this conversation. Pippa, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. And yourself?
Cool. So Pippa, give us a little bit of background on, what you've done and sort of just your experience in the gaming industry thus far.
I suppose I've always just played games. I mean, I've been playing games all my life, so it's always a bit of a weird question for me when people ask me that. But I suppose from a professional level, I did my master's in 3D animation in 2005, and I wrote my master's thesis on video games. My background is fine art, so I wrote it on the ways that artists use the medium of video game technology in fine art practice. And cool. When I finished that, I actually ended up lecturing. I taught at WITS for 3 years, teaching honors and masters in 3D animation and a theory course in video games. And in about 2008, I was still teaching at WITS, and my boss, who was the head of digital arts at the time, came to me and said to me that he had a producer friend who was starting a new TV show, and they were looking specifically for a female host who knew a lot about video games, and he thought that I would be a good fit, and could he give him my name? And I sort of said, okay. I had no TV experience whatsoever, but I sort of said, yeah, sure, that sounds fine. And I ended up doing a screen test, which turned into a pilot, which ended up as I was visiting my family in Australia, and I got an email saying, so when do you get back from Australia? And I sort of said, I don't know, like the 1st of May or something like that. And they sort of said, cool. So can you come into studio on the 5th, because we want to go to air on the 8th. And that was my introduction to TV. And that show was an internationally syndicated show called Player, which was a weekly show on pre-recorded show on video games, like video game reviews and things. So we did a lot of the local links and the revoicing and things like that to localize it for the South African market. And then 6 months later, they came to me and said, cool, we are doing a daily live show, and you're hosting that too, and that's starting in December. And I was still teaching at WITS at this time, so this was kind of what I did on my off day. And so I went from no TV to pre-recorded TV to live TV in the space of 6 months, which was insane.
Yeah.
And
yeah, totally.
As I said, I was still teaching at WITS, so I was making content, and I was shooting with the production house, which is a local production house called Don't Look Down Productions. And I just was something I was doing both of those things. And then when I eventually resigned from WITS, which was completely unrelated, I just needed a bit of a change. The production house said to me, well, do you want to come and work for us as a content producer? So then I ended up working for them as a content producer for a few years. So I was making content and I was presenting the show. And then The Verge ran for 4 years. Sorry, I think I neglected to mention that the live show was called The Verge. So we were doing Player and The Verge. And that ran for 4 years until 2012. And the show was eventually cancelled. I'm still sort of fairly active in the gaming industry. I still review occasionally, although not as much as I used to. I've kind of gotten into other tech aspects of, like tech reviews and all of that kind of stuff. I think it's something that once you're there, you kind of just carry on doing, if that makes sense. And I built up a big network of contacts and things like that as well. So when you build up those contacts, and people know what they get from you. So
you definitely have a wealth of experience and knowledge, and I think it's that kind of exposure is like priceless. But we also recognize that you're in a sort of a newer season. I wouldn't say new, but as a mom of 2 boys, right?
Yes, I've got 2 boys, a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old.
And what has it been like, in terms of being a mom and a gaming mom, and introducing your kids to that?
So I had my first child when I was still working on The Verge. So my eldest son was born in 2011. And, it's funny, I think you never really understand the change that comes along with that. When you, particularly as a gamer, when you are, you're used to being able to play whatever games you want, whenever you want. And it doesn't, age restrictions don't need to bother you. You have unlimited, to a certain extent, obviously, if you're working, it's a little bit different. But as someone with no children, you have unlimited time to play, into the small hours of the night. Well, small hours of the morning, late hours of the night, you know what I mean? You don't have that luxury as a parent. So your gaming time becomes, firstly, for yourself, more limited. And then you become much more conscious of what you're playing and if your children are watching. So for the first few years, my eldest son was not interested in video games at all. I would sort of try and get him into what I thought was sort of like, the sort of fun, family-friendly things. He didn't want to know. He was very uninterested. And I would sort of, look, mommy's doing this. Do you want to try it? No. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's fine. But then when he was about 3, I was given Skylanders to review. I think Skylanders Trap Team to review. And because the little figurines come along with that, of course, they were like toys. So suddenly he had this interest, and he suddenly began figuring out how to play this. And any person who is a gamer will know that the moment that they try and get someone who is a non-gamer to use a controller, there's always that like awkward moment where they can't figure out how to move forward and jump at the same time. So they just kind of like jump up and down on the spot. And my son went from jumping up and down on the spot to doing timed platform jumps whilst fighting enemies in the space of maybe a week.
Wow.
At 3. And that was really
a chip off the old block.
But you know what the thing is? I think it's when you suddenly realize that there really are benefits that often we take for granted and that you forget about. And I think a lot of parents forget about. The media paints video games as this like evil and no screen time above so many hours and nothing under 2 years and all of this kind of stuff. But there are also other benefits that come along with that. And looking at my kids, I can see that. So things like fine motor coordination is the one. Like that's I watched it spike with him. It was crazy. And then puzzle solving. I mean, like I went and asked him, did he want help with a puzzle on something? And he said, no, he knows how to do it. And I watched him get through this, like you had to move blocks around to get to the other side of this like maze. And he did it without any help from me. And I was like, oh, okay. So I think it's about looking at, yes, there are things that aren't necessarily appropriate for children, but there are also benefits to having your kids play video games that I think we aren't always aware of.
Now, I played games since I was 10, 11. And I think you almost take for granted when you do how much knowledge you have on the subject, especially when you're talking to somebody that maybe hasn't played.
Yeah. And
suddenly has kids and it actually has no real idea of what these kids are getting into and what, as a parent, what should they be doing? What should they be looking out for? And it is interesting when you say that, the fact that actually there's a lot of games out there that really do function as quite interesting learning and development tools. For example, you have things like Minecraft, which is now being taught in schools across countries, where, just teaching kids about physics and geology and architecture and, as you said, that kind of problem solving. Here's a problem, here are the tools the game gives you, how do you solve this? I think it's an interesting topic to talk about because, as a parent that maybe doesn't really understand gaming very much, there's actually a lot of really positive positive aspects in it, which we kind of do want to try and highlight.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. You know, I mean, I think weirdly, my kids got into Minecraft quite late. Like maybe only in like the last year or so, I would say, which is, I don't know why. I mean, I think I didn't have it before that, and I wasn't playing it, and because I wasn't playing it, they weren't playing it. And then not so long ago, my eldest son said to me, no, a lot of his friends are playing Minecraft and he really wants to play Minecraft. And I sort of said, okay, fine. And I bought it for him on PlayStation. And I walked in yesterday, actually, to find the two of them building an entire world split screen. My eldest son had built a mirrored skyscraper because he was starting a business. And he explained how this business was going to work, and it was a transport business because it was like, you know, he was building the railway tracks here, and then like this could happen, and then, you know, then this one could pay. And there was this whole, not only just the physics of it, but this whole backstory as to why it looked like that, and the intricacies behind it. And that for me was actually something. You know, even though like I know that they sort of have a bit of an affinity for video games and for those kinds of things, it's even now still almost came as a surprise to go, oh, hey, like they've actually, both of them have sat and discussed this together. So my 6 and 9-year-old sat and discussed what they were going to do, why they were going to do it, and how they were going to build it, which the problem solving and the sort of reasoning and working out all of those things behind it, I was really quite pleasantly surprised. And there are a lot of, I mean, like my eldest son has gone on some, it's called Think Camp. So it's like a holiday workshop where they teach things like robotics and programming and things like that. And he went, I think it was last year before all the COVID drama, he went on a coding workshop and built like a little maze video game in an afternoon, and I know that one of the other camps that they run is a Minecraft one, and it's like learning engineering with Minecraft, which is, it's like digital Lego. It's wonderful.
So when we had our son, I took kind of a 2-year period off of gaming, except for very early on when he was waking up, when he was sort of a month, and I was playing Grand Theft Auto with him sitting on my chest asleep, which maybe wasn't the best thing, but and then when I started sort of to get back into it, I thought I'd try Fortnite. And it's actually the first time I felt old gaming, where I had a voice chat, which was clearly a bunch of like 15-year-olds yelling at each other. And I actually thought, you know, maybe I'm getting too old for this kind of game. But I mean, even if you look at a game like that, the kind of building aspect of it.
Yes.
I mean, I'm someone who thinks they're quite good at games, and just really struggled with that. And just seeing that kind of hand-eye coordination of some players, like young players, building entire structures in the space of like 60 seconds or so. And yeah, it's really impressive just to see that the kind of involvement that people have in those titles.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. You know, one of the things, and I do understand with a lot of parents, you know, when they sort of, oh, well, you know, Fortnite, I think the age restriction is 12 or something like that. And my kids are a bit younger and they are playing Fortnite. I think there's two things. So the one is that I think it does come down to the maturity of the child. So as with all things, you know, restrictions and ratings and whatever are a guideline for parents to understand what is appropriate and what is not. So, for example, I won't let my children play Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto. But they are very aware that like Fortnite is like fantasy violence, whereas it's mainly because of the way it looks and things like that. But for me, I find that, I mean, there was a little bit of pressure on my side because, you know, my eldest son, all their friends were playing, and well, all his friends were playing. And then, of course, once my eldest son started playing, then the younger one wanted to play. And so it kind of became a bit of a battle in the household. And I held out on Fortnite for a very, very long time, partly because I think, you know, when something becomes popular, you like my instinctive reaction is, no, I'm not going to fall prey to the hype. But when lockdown started, and my kids were only still sort of playing very occasionally at the time, and then lockdown started, and suddenly they weren't seeing their friends at school every day, and the sort of screen time restrictions that, perhaps we had all put in. Everyone has this idea that, oh, your kids can only have so much screen time and whatever. And, lockdown, suddenly everyone's cooped up and they can't go out anywhere and they can't do anything and you can't take them anywhere. And so you tend to allow a little bit more screen time. But every morning they were logging on to Fortnite and logging on specifically with their friends, playing with their friends, talking to their friends, not just about Fortnite, about, all the stuff and about lockdown and about their parents working from home and how they felt about that. Because I would sit, like, the TV was, a couple rooms away from my bedroom, and I could hear my eldest son talking to various friends and whatever. And that for me actually was really, I think it helped a lot to ease that sort of kind of cabin fever. Because they were still having a social interaction without having to worry about, like, oh, well, we can't go out, we can't meet these people in person, but they were all still socializing. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And they actually, to be honest, they don't even play Fortnite that often anymore. Maybe because they are seeing their friends now every other day at school. They've kind of, and they swap backwards and forwards between different games. But that for me was a real eye opener, that it really was a very social thing for that generation.
I read something quite interesting during the lockdown where some teams and some companies were, instead of having Zoom calls, they were creating characters in Red Dead Redemption online.
I
and
saw
having
that
meetings
as well,
around
and
campfires.
I would have loved that. I thought it would be amazing, and they were all going and sitting around the campfire.
Yeah, I tried to broach that idea to my team, and I was shut down.
Like, what? What are you talking about? Yeah, no, that totally went over my head.
To be fair, I only have like a handful of people in my team that play Red Dead, so it wouldn't have been very practical. They weren't all gamers. So
yeah. No, I think I have one.
There's only so much,
and that's me. But we touched on the idea of age-appropriate games, and I think that's quite important. I mean, as you said, there's some titles you won't let your kids play, and rightfully so, because there are some titles which are made for adults, in the same way as, yes, books and films and TV shows are there for certain age groups. Is there sort of a right time to introduce your child to a game?
I do see a lot of research that indicates that children shouldn't have any screen time before the age of 2. I don't think that's practical, to be perfectly honest. I mean, if I'm perfectly honest, I don't think that that's a practical approach.
As a parent as well, I don't. I would have a lot of respect for a parent that didn't let their kids do that for those first 2 years.
But I mean, because we're and like in modern society, we're all attached to our phones all the time, and our tablets and our laptops, and I'm like, firstly, your children are seeing you do that the whole time, and most of the time we're doing it for work. It's not like, oh well, it's all pleasure, but at the same time, they learn by emulation. So that's the one side of it, and also they're curious and they want to find out. And I think that a lot of kids are exposed to tablets at a very young age, and as I said, I don't think it's entirely practical. You can control the content that they're watching or interacting with, but I don't think it's practical to say that they will not have any screen time before 2. But that is the sort of guideline anyway. I think, apart from like tablet apps and games, I would say my kids sort of probably started taking an interest at around 3. My younger one, probably younger, but that's because he wanted to be his brother. And I don't mean be like his brother. I think he wanted to be his brother. It was like, if Elio did it, Zakai would do it. That was exactly the... But, there certainly are games that are a bit more practical and family friendly. And I think that it's looking at what the kids are gaining from it, and what they're learning from it. I suppose, if you're limiting the amount of time that they're playing and what they're playing, I would say most kids probably have the sort of fine motor coordination probably at around 3 to at least sort of do the basic stuff. I don't know if that is really helpful or answers your question at all.
There are those guidelines there, especially with age restrictions, but I think it's important to remember that they are just guidelines. And every kid is different. And I mean, for me, I think it's more a case of when they start showing an interest, that's the best time to introduce them.
I think that's a very good point, is the fact that it's when they start showing an interest and you can take an interest with them. My kids play together, which I'm very fortunate because I have two, and I have two that are interested in the same kinds of games, even though they don't always want to play the same things at the same time. So sometimes my youngest one will go and complain that, oh, well, his brother doesn't want to play this with him. And his brother's like, but I wanted to play something else. He's like, I don't want to play the same game. So he's like, if I don't want to play that and you're using the TV, so well, then I've got to go and do something else because I don't want to play that game. But for the most part, they like to play together. My youngest one in particular often wants me firstly to come and watch him, or otherwise play with him. And I can't always do that because, it's often if it's during the day, I'm working. But they do like that co-op, and it is, I think it is actually quite a bonding experience. I don't think, people or parents who don't play games, I don't think you actually realize how bonding it can be to do something together. It's like, my youngest son, for example, likes to garden with me. And it is something that we've sort of started doing, like every weekend. He'll come and help me like plant flowers and, water the garden and like do stuff with me, which is really nice. It's a really nice togetherness experience. But I don't think you actually realize how much problem solving and playing games like this it can be frustrating, but it can also be incredibly rewarding.
Pippa, talking about gardening, I did wonder, how important is it for you also as a mom who games and with your kids gaming, how important is it to bring balance into sort of indoor, gaming time versus outdoor sort of in nature and more sort of real tactile playing?
Oh, I mean, that is very important. I don't think that you can ever think that just plonking your kid in front of a TV or letting them play all day is going to be the right approach. Like yes, they gain certain things from that, but my kids are more than happy to go out and play in the garden, or we have a swimming pool. They'll go and swim. We've got a trampoline. They'll go and jump on the trampoline. So they're also very active. They're not just sitting in front of the TV all day. My eldest one is a little bit more self-regulating. Like if he knows he's been sitting there for a while and he can feel himself start to get irritable, and then he'll stop playing and go do something else. My younger one, not so much, but normally when one stops, the other will stop. And if they're like, oh, well, I want to go outside and do something, then they'll both go outside and go and play together and go and do stuff, which is really nice. And I think it is important. Certainly, when I've noticed working from home, me sitting in front of my computer all day is not good for me. I think when you work in an office, you have a tendency to get up and go to a meeting and move around and do those kinds of things. And I don't, now that we sit in front of our computers all day and all our meetings are on our computers, and I feel the loss of physical movement. And I think they do as well. And I think this really emphasizes how important that is. It is very important for them to still have that balance.
It's amazing how fast, I mean, this is technology in general, but how much the kind of gaming scene has changed over the last 10, 15 years. I mean, again, I think back to when I was young playing, the kind of things that I was playing and what you've got now, it's just, it's a world of difference. And that's where I think for those of us who did grow up gaming, we kind of have a better grasp of, what's out there and what to know and what to look out for. And so, yeah, I want to just find out from your perspective, what do you think are kind of the big things to look out for in gaming in general for the next coming year or so? I know we've got the big console launches coming up now, which is usually kind of dominates the news cycle. But again, as a parent, sort of looking at what your kids are looking at, is any sort of big trends to look out for 2021 and the future?
I'm currently looking forward to Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah.
It is going to be released on previous gen. So then when the next gen consoles come out, you can upgrade and it will be available. But the one that I'm looking forward to is Cyberpunk. I'm a big fan of the studio who made The Witcher.
Yeah.
Every time I've been to E3 in the past few years, the Cyberpunk press events are always like my absolute highlight. It went from an announcement to nothing for years and years and years to suddenly all of this hype around it. And I remember the first gameplay video I saw of it, and I was like, this is like The Witcher, but in the future and first person. I'm in. Yes, I would say that's probably my highlight, at least for the next few months until I maybe move on to something else. I'm a big RPG player, so it's certainly not going to be released in the next couple of years. But Dragon Age 4 will be the next one.
Yeah, I remember when they first announced that Cyberpunk. I think it was even before The Witcher 2 came out. I mean, that's how long ago it was. And then, yeah, as you said, like nothing. And then suddenly the last sort of 2 or 3 years, it's just been like ramping up the hype. I've always preferred Mass Effect to Dragon Age. So I don't know what's really going on with that series, unfortunately, but
that's fair. So like, Mass Effect actually is probably the first game that made me enjoy space games. I hate space games. I like the moment and weirdly, my husband, who is not an RPG player, feels exactly the same. Both of us, like when I remember years ago, before the days of digital downloads, you'd go into a shop and there were all these games, and we would go and sit and have a look. It's like, oh, what is this? And you'd pick it up and I'd turn it over and it would say aliens, and I'm like, no, moving on. And I don't like alien games. I'm not. It's just, it really does nothing for me. And so I think I never played Mass Effect, the first Mass Effect, because of that. And then I can't remember if it was because of The Verge or if it was just one of those things that I, on a spur of the moment, like played Mass Effect 2, and it had me hooked. And I after that, I went back and played everything, and then Mass Effect 3 came out. We won't really talk too much about Andromeda, which was meh. But that really, I was like, oh wow, this is really great.
I mean, Mass Effect 2 is like the Empire Strikes Back of video games.
It really is.
Kind of the gold star.
Yes, it was, and I mean, I suppose it's a good introduction to the franchise. To kind of look and go, oh my god, this is amazing. And like, as I said, like, I like RPGs, and I like I think BioWare, that really is their speciality. Even if there are some that are better than others, they put a lot of care and thought into the storylines and the character development. And Dragon Age for me is really that. Like, Dragon Age has such, in a lot of ways, like GTA, there's a lot of cross-referentiality. Games that are referencing other games that have characters with whole backstories that may or may not be in one. Like, it's just, the world is so detailed, and I really love that. That's always been something that's been a bit of a passion of mine.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the whole imagination aspect of it, which, like, for me, is what captures so well. And again, this is something I think this is what kids are finding in these. It's basically entire worlds which you are, you can run free in, and I think really that's kind of one of the big draws of it. It's no longer just sitting playing Pac-Man and eating ghosts. You're engaging with entire universes, and that's really it's quite amazing, the kind of stuff that you're able to do in games right now.
So if you do want some recommendations for games that I think that both parents and kids would enjoy, that are definitely family friendly and things that you can kind of enjoy together. If you do have a Nintendo Switch, Nintendo, as a general rule, if it's not third-party games, they make a lot of really family-friendly games. So all of the Mario games are, right up there. Mario, like the Super Mario World, Mario Kart is a lot of fun. And the other one that's, if you're more interested in also looking at how the sort of engineering side of it is that Nintendo Labo, which actually has the little cardboard things that you build, and then those are part of the game, and they sort of, you can interact with those in the game. You can fish, and you can make a robot suit, and like a fighting game with a robot suit. And that's my kids had a lot of fun with that. They really, really enjoyed that. And another one, maybe slightly older because it does require some problem solving, but my kids really like it as well, is Overcooked. Overcooked is a lot of fun. It's like basically you work in a restaurant. It's all like top down, and you work in a restaurant and you get orders, and you have to put the orders together and serve them to the customers. And my kids play that co-op, and they really, really love it. And the last one I think is Rocket League. So Rocket League is basically soccer with cars, if that makes any sense. Yeah. But again, my kids really, really love that and have a lot of fun. And I think that's the things, that games really are about fun. And if you can have fun with your children, and not just leave them to have fun by themselves, that's a win in my book.
Pippa, thanks so much. It's been super interesting for me and quite a lot to learn. But I've really enjoyed engaging with you and picking your brain a bit. We really appreciate your time. So thanks so much. We just loved having you here.
You're welcome. It was a lot of fun.
This is Tech Talk with Vodacom, trending tech made simple. Visit Vodacom now for more about the world of tech, and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast.